Hello ladies, it's Dr. T again, and we are on episode number 5. Yes, we've made it to the 5th episode, and today we're going to talk about Lot's wife. We're going to find out what we think Lot's wife's name is and what that meaning is. We're going to talk through the biblical and theological principles of Lot's wife, and then we're going to talk about the application. As you can tell, I am still struggling with my asthma. It is getting the better of me, but I am going to press forward. I'm going to continue to post videos, continue to make this study available to you as long as I have a voice. So bear with me as I continue to record and continue to post videos. If you would love to send up a prayer for my asthma and my voice, I will take all of those. I'm actually feeling a lot better, but still my voice has not come back. They think it's one of the side effects of the medication affecting my vocal cords, which is really sad to me because I am a worship leader and I do miss singing, but right now I'm just grateful that I can talk. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about Lot's wife. Let's get started. So in researching her, as you know, if you're familiar with Lot's wife's story, she's most famous for looking back and turning to a pillar of salt. Isn't it crazy that every woman that we've talked about so far is literally famous for her sin? I really want you guys to sit with that and think about that, and think about the fact that we've been taught the Bible for so long in a certain way, with a certain viewpoint and a certain perspective, that we have become desensitized to the fact that sometimes women are painted in a bad light. Now, I'm not generalizing and saying that everybody does that, but I'm just saying that it is out there. It is ever present, and I wanted to study the Bible for myself, to enlighten myself on these passages and these women, because I don't know about you, but I started feeling like a second-class citizen with regards to Christianity and my relationship with Christ. So that made me dig deeper into the passages so I could love myself the way God intended to love me, and not from the perspective of outside sources. So we're going to talk about Lot's wife today. I'm excited to talk about her. We're going to be reading from Genesis 19. I'll put the passage up as I normally do, and we're going to just talk through the passage. We're going to read it, we're going to talk through it, and so let's just dive right in. So Lot's wife, in Jewish explanations, she is referred to Adu or Edith. Adu means noble or kind, and Edith means riches or blessed, in association with war. So we're going to dive right into the scripture. We are going to be reading from Genesis 19, 1 through 19. She's not mentioned a lot through the reading. She's really mentioned maybe 2 times, once in Luke and once in Genesis. And so we're gonna have to draw some parallels with regards to what's happening in the story, the culture of the time, the religious practices of the time, what was going on historically. So we can draw from that what we can learn from Lot's wife's story. So let's just read. We're in Genesis 19. Again, I want to reiterate, I'm going to do my little spiel about the Bible. Feel free to read from any translation you would like to read from. I will be reading from the contemporary English version of the Bible because I find it to be the simplest form of the text. Feel free to read from King James. I would suggest, if you're going to study from the NIV or NLT. But when teaching, I teach a lot of people that have never read the Bible ever in their lives, and to give them the King James version is like giving someone a Shakespearean book that has never read English in their life. So with that being said, I I tend to teach from the contemporary English version of the Bible because I've encountered so many people that have not read the Bible at all, and it just gives the simplest translation of the Bible. Again, but if you're going to study the written word of Christ, the word of the Bible, then you definitely should study through the NIV or the NLT version of the Bible. So let's get started. Genesis 19, 1 through 19. That evening the two angels arrived in Sodom while Lot was sitting near the city gate. When Lot saw them, he got up, bowed down low, and said, "Gentlemen, I am your servant. Please come to my home. You can wash your feet, spend the night, and be on your way in the morning." They told him, "No, we'll spend the night in the city square." But Lot kept insisting until they finally agreed and went home with him. He baked some bread, cooked a meal, and they ate. Now, what's the likelihood that Lot baked the bread? Let's be realistic, but gonna keep reading. Before Lot and his guests could go to bed, every man in Sodom, young and old, came and stood outside the house and started shouting, where are your visitors? Send them out so we can have sex with them." He went outside and shut the door behind him. Then he said, friends, please don't do such terrible things. I have 2 daughters who have never been married. I'll bring them out and you can do whatever you want with them, but don't harm these men. They are guests in my home." Okay, I'm gonna pause right there. Lot's wife is inside of the house while this is happening. And the angels come to visit Lot. Lot is a great host, sets out everything. He's got the charcuterie board. He's got cookies, donuts, muffins, whatever you sit out for guests. He's sitting it all out. He's laying out the red carpet for them. Because of the cultural times, I'm going to assume that actually Lot's wife set all of that out, because men just did not do that during that time. I'm really shocked that this version says that Lot set the stuff out. I'm going to make the assumption that Lot's wife set the stuff out during this time, because culturally men just didn't do that kind of stuff. Women did that, or they had some kind of maiden or servant or slave that did those kinds of things. So she is in the house, and when you think about culturally what homes were like then, they were not like the multi-room places that we live in now. They didn't have second floors, third floors, a guest bedroom, an eat-in kitchen, all of those things that we look for when we're buying a home. Is basically one room. So we can assume that she is privy to everything that's happening, that she can definitely hear the men shouting outside, asking to sleep with the angels that have come to visit Lot. And she can definitely hear her husband offer up their daughters to sleep with these men. Now, Sodom and Gomorrah was the most sinful place during this time. It's described as a place filled with a lot of sexual immorality, sexual obscenity, sexual acts that are offensive to the natural order of God. So it is not surprising that the men want to have sex with the angels that have come to visit Lot. But the sheer craziness of it all is that this is another indication that women are property, that we are not honored as the equal day partners, as we talked about with Eve, that they are presented as property. And here Lot is offering them up. How you think Lot's wife felt? about this. Now, when I first read it, I really thought to myself, Lot's wife had to be like terrified that her husband is offering his daughters up to the men of the town. I also thought probably really angry that her husband is offering up their daughters to these men over some strangers that they don't know. But then as we were talking through it in the virtual class, one of the young ladies said that she may not have been upset because she lived in Sodom and this was normal behavior. She could have been completely desensitized to what we would think is horrendous, which would be offering your daughters up to sleep with these men. That she would think that it was a natural act and not really have a strong response to it. And I really hadn't thought about that. And I think that's a fantastic perspective on what's going on here and what Lot's wife, and why we don't necessarily see her objecting here to him offering up their daughters. She may have been desensitized. I mean, they lived there, I think, for 30 something odd years. So I mean, she's human. She's just like us. We get desensitized. There is a great quote from a movie that I love. I think the movie is called Where'd You Go, Bernadette? And in the introduction of the movie, the young girl talks about how our brain has the ability to minimize things over long periods of time, whether bad or something good, something horrific or something fantastic. And she talks about how her father lost the appreciation for her mother and the wonderful things about her mother because of that part of our brains, and how if it's not a bomb or something like that, we just get desensitized. It's just a natural protection that happens with brains. So we can make the assumption, it is easy to take that perspective that Lot's wife could possibly be completely desensitized to this, which is why we don't see a response from her when this is happening. So let's continue on reading. Again, we are in Genesis 19 and we left off at verse 8. We're going to pick up at verse 9. Again, that's Genesis 19. We left off in verse 8. We're going to pick up in verse 9. Don't get in our way, the crowd answered. You're an outsider. What right do you have to order us around? You're an outsider. What right do you have to order us around? We'll do worse things to you than we're going to do to them. The crowd kept arguing with Lot. Finally, they rushed toward the door and broke it down. But the two angels in the house reached out and pulled Lot safely inside. Then they struck everyone in the crowd blind, and none of them could even find the floor. The two angels said to Lot, "The Lord has heard many terrible things about the people of Sodom and has set us here to destroy the city. Take your family and leave. Take every relative you have in the city, as well as the men your daughters are going to marry." Lot went to the men that his daughters were engaged to and said, Hurry and get out of here. The Lord is going to destroy this city." But they thought he was joking and they laughed at him. Early the next morning, the two angels tried to make Lot hurry and leave. They said, "Take your wife and your two daughters and get out of here as fast as you can. If you don't, every one of you will be killed when the Lord destroys the city." At first, Lot just stood there, but the Lord wanted to save him. So the angels took Lot, his wife, and the two daughters by the hand and led them out of the city. When they were outside, one of the angels said, "Run for your lives. Don't even look back. And don't stop in the valley. Run to the hills where you will be saved." Lot answered, "You have done us a great favor, sir. You have saved our lives. But please don't make us go to the hills. That's too far away. The city will be destroyed before we can get there, and we will be killed when it happens." So the angels come to save Lot's wife. Now, I'm telling you, this Lot has been trouble since the beginning. If you read through the details of Abraham's journey, you will see that Lot caused a lot of battles that Abraham had to fight. And I really fought Abraham because when we talked about Sarah, we read the passage of God telling Abraham to leave the land that he was living in and just take his household. Well, Lot was not living in his household, but he was a family member of Abraham. There are many different commentaries that say he was his cousin, his nephew. There isn't a concrete, or I couldn't find a concrete indication of how they were related, but they are related to one another. And but he didn't live in Abraham's house. So Abraham was already disobedient to God because he took Lot with him, and Lot didn't live in his house. And Lot has been causing trouble ever since. Again, if you go back to and read through a lot of those passages in the beginning stages of Abraham, when Abraham was Abram, he is fighting a lot of battles because of Lot. Now, Lot is living right on the outskirts of the city, so he's not actually in Sodom. He's on the edge of it, but he's privy to all of the sin that is happening in Sodom. And why live that close to it if you're and be exposed to that every day? So he's living very close to Sodom, basically on the outskirts of it. And the angels come to save his life. And like, this dude doesn't even want to go. This is so insane to me. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm just personally annoyed by Lot. I know it shouldn't be, but I am. Like, he's so irritating. So he is, so he doesn't want to go. Now, I wonder if his hesitation, if his wife felt that same hesitation, because when we skip down to, I think it's 1929, let me pull it up. I used my physical Bible, didn't I? I keep saying that, and I keep using my technology. It's just easiest, I guess. So I am in Genesis 19, and I've skipped down. I stopped reading at 1919. Great year. I don't know that. I'm just kidding. And I'm skipping down to 1929. This is 1923. The sun was coming up as Lot reached the town of Zoar, and the Lord sent burning sulfur down like rain in Sodom and Gomorrah. He destroyed those cities and everyone who lived in them, as well as their land and the trees and the grass that grew them. On the way, Lot's wife looked back and was turned to a block of salt. So I wonder if Lot's hesitation the night before influenced Lot's wife Edith, and like maybe that was in the back of her mind, and maybe that's why she looked back. But I don't want to make it sound like I'm blaming Lot. I'm just saying, in relationships we influence one another, whether it is directly or indirectly, whether it's consciously or subliminally. Forrest had trouble saying that word. So I just wonder if his hesitation and not wanting to leave that night before and giving the angel such a hard time about leaving, that maybe she had those same emotions and those same feelings because they were one. Usually if a couple wants to do something, they're usually on one accord, like, hey, let's move to the suburbs. No, or hey, let's move to the city. Or hey, let's buy a new car. Or hey, let's take a family vacation. Those are decisions that you make as a couple, and they're making this decision as a couple to leave. So I wonder if they both had some hesitation on leaving, and that's why she looks back. There's never an explanation of why she looked back, or maybe she was reminiscent on what she was leaving. I mean, she's leaving her home and it's being destroyed. It's not like You know, sometimes when we get older, we want to go back and see our childhood homes, and sometimes it's still standing and we have all of the nostalgia wrapped around it. We have memories about, oh, I used to play in the yard and I remember how I used to go in the side door, or my friend Kelly lives 2 blocks down, or whatever memory you may have. But she can't revisit that home because it's burnt. So it's like revisiting your childhood home, and they've torn it down. It's been condemned. It's just an empty lot there now. So she may have been having those feelings, even though we may have a perspective of, it was such a bad place. Why wouldn't you want to leave? But again, she could have been desensitized, like the young lady in my class was talking about, to the horrors of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was her norm. We get desensitized all the time. I mean, I've stated before, I live in Ohio, and the seasons are constantly changing, sometimes from day to day. Sometimes we get 3 seasons in one day. After you've lived here for so long, you just get desensitized to it, and it isn't that big of a deal until someone from another state comes to visit and they're like, oh my gosh, it was snowing this morning and now it's 70 degrees. And you're like, oh yeah, that happens here. And it's also like that quote that I talked to you about, that from the movie, Where'd You Go, Bernadette, when the little girl is talking about that the aspect of our brains that naturally normalizes everything. So whether it's good, whether it's bad, our brains tend to just normalize everything. So I really want us to think about that with regards to Lot's wife and why she made the decision to look back. I don't want us to judge her, and I want us to know her for more than just that. I also want us to talk about the significance of God turning her into salt, because if you read, I want to say it's in Deuteronomy, there's a story about the people of Korah who God just, like, they're disrespecting Moses, and God literally just opens the ground and kills them all. He could have done that to Lot's wife. So there's definitely some significance in how she died, why God turned her into a pillar of salt, and we'll talk about that when we get to the theological portion of the study. But that's basically the verses about Lot's wife. The only other passage is Luke 17:28 through 33. Again, that's Luke 17. Luke 17:28 through 33. And I really just want to focus on 32 and 33. And it says, remember Lot's wife. Whosoever shall seek to save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall lose his life shall preserve it. This is talking about sacrifice and the importance of obedience over sacrifice. And since Lot's wife was disobedient, then she lost her life. So that is what that passage is discussing. And it speaks to her biblical relevance, which we will talk about. I guess now we may as well dive right in, since we just read that passage again. That's Luke 17. It's actually Luke 17:32 and 33. So let's talk about Lot's wife's biblical relevance. So she is a mother, she is a wife. She has had an example. Her story is running parallel with Sarah, Hagar, and Abraham's. So this isn't chronological, this is simultaneous. And so she does have some examples of what motherhood and wifelyhood should look like. I'm not sure that Sarah was the greatest example, but Noah's wife was, and she was before this. So we can make the assumption that Lot's wife had an example. But since she lived in Sodom, I don't know if she had great examples to draw from with regards to being a great wife. But because we see no indication from her having conflict with Lot as he is sacrificing his daughter sexually, or offering his daughters up sexually. She has no dispute against that. So we can assume that she was an obedient wife. She was a submissive wife. With regards to being a mother, by modern day standards, we would probably judge her and say that she's not a great mother because she doesn't protect her daughters. But we aren't in her situation. We aren't living in a time where women don't have choices, and she was a commodity then and not recognized as an actual human being with rights and respect and honor. So we don't know what we would have chosen then. And where could she go if she ran away? She and her daughters would be without room and board. So they would have nowhere to live and no food. And how would she provide for them? Because women could not work then. And divorcing was just not even heard of. So as a mother and a wife, her biblical significance is relevant with regards to being obedient and being submissive. I'm sorry, I'm looking through my notes because when I'm talking, I'm flipping through my notes so quickly that sometimes they get jumbled up. I don't know why I don't page number. It's a bad habit of mine. I'll be doing that from now on. I appreciate you all kind of going through this with me, and as I fumble through things and figure things out, I appreciate your patience. So that's her biblical relevance with regard to Lot's wife. Oh, here's the paper that I just wanted to make sure I'm touching on everything. And according to God's plan, we see that in Luke, God's plan was to show the example of obedience over sacrifice, and that any man that chooses his life instead of obedience will lose his life. And Lot's wife, she chose her life by looking back, by being disobedient, and she sacrificed her life by being disobedient. So that was her biblical relevance to God's plan, was to teach us a lesson of obedience over sacrifice. Now, Lot's wife's theological relevance was the fact that God turned her into a pillar of salt. So so in the Old Testament, if you look up, and I'll put these scriptures up, it's Leviticus 2:13, Job 6:6, Ezekiel 16:4. Salt was very valuable in the Old Testament. Israel was considered a worthy conquest by the Romans because of its large depositories of salt. It was essential in the grain offering. So it was necessary to harvest grain. It was essential to the grain process. So salt was extremely important. And then in the New Testament, in Matthew 5:13, Mark 9:50, and Luke 14:34, you will see that Christians are encouraged to be the salt of the earth, a light in a dark world, meaning that we should comfort the hurting, encourage the discouraged, and calm the unsettled. So there's a huge significance to turning her into salt, and not just killing her in some other form or fashion, which God could have chosen any way to take her life, to send us the message of disobedience with regards to. So we definitely want to take a moment and pay attention why he would turn her into salt particularly. So the lesson of Lot's wife is so valuable. I think that God turns her to salt to signify the value of the lesson of choosing obedience over disobedience, choosing to sacrifice instead of not sacrificing. It's the most memorable thing about her, and it's the only thing that's mentioned about her. So that lets you know the significance of God turning her into salt and the ramifications of her disobedience. It's essential to the practice of Christians today. So when we think about getting to the application point, the application of Lot's wife is definitely choosing obedience over sacrifice, because you want to obey and not sacrifice your life, and the value of it is displayed in turning her into salt, so we can know how important this lesson is. Application is definitely about praying through a sense of obedience, and really pray through that passage of Luke, I think it's Luke 17, 32 and 33. I want you to take some time to really pray through that passage and ask yourself questions about being obedient. And are there situations in your life where you are choosing? And are there situations in your life where you are choosing to look backwards instead of focusing forward, where God has focused your eyes on instead of letting go of your past? So I really want you to think through those and pray through those as the application of Lot's wife. So that's all I have for Lot's wife today. I think we talked a little bit about her moral aptitude, which would be obedience. She was disobedient at the end, but she was obedient in the beginning because she didn't do anything to interfere with what the conversation that Lot was having with the angels, nor the conversation that Lot was having with the men outside of the house. She packed up the house to go, so she had obedience. At the end, she just faltered in that. She was submissive to her husband. We don't see any area in passage where she practiced any where she wasn't submissive. With regards to the fruits of the Spirit, I think the one she was struggling with was self-control. She couldn't control herself at the end. She had done it so well up until that point, but when it was time to leave and she was given the directive of not looking back, she struggled there. So definitely some self-control was, she was challenged in that fruit of the Spirit. But I think a lot of the other fruits of the Spirit, we can assume that she practiced because there's no indication that she didn't. It doesn't describe her as a bad wife. It doesn't describe her any negative life besides at the end that she was disobedient. So I guess the fruit of the Spirit that I think that she was probably struggling with was self-control there at the end. So that's Lot's wife. I made it through with a little bit of voice that I have left. And maybe a little pause between videos as I attempt to recover. I ask your prayers to pray for me as I am struggling through battling my asthma. It seems to be getting progressively worse again, but like I said, I'm feeling better, but I am struggling to talk a lot of times. But I'm very dedicated to doing this. God really laid this on my heart during this time to do this. So I want to be obedient. I don't want to be like Lot's wife. It's better to obey than to sacrifice. I'm already living and praying through Luke 17, 32 through 33. So there may be a little bit of pause between video episode 6 and 7. Because I'm just not feeling well. So if you guys, I just don't have the ability to talk for long periods of time. So if you guys could pray through that. But thank you for tuning in. I will put up the scriptures. I will put up the fruits of the Spirit. I'll put up the discussion questions. And please, 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 please subscribe to the channel. Click that button down there. I promise you, you won't get bombarded with all of these messages. You can turn off your notifications. Just please subscribe. It matters to the power of that be. If you can subscribe to the channel, you can also send email questions. I love getting email questions. I get them all the time about certain women of the Bible, things I've taught through, things that women of the Bible that people want to talk through, discuss. So you can email at theologyofwomen@gmail.com. That's one phrase, all lowercase letters. You can also tag me or message me or DM me on my social medias, which on Instagram is Dr. TLC squared. On Twitter, it is Dr. T Marie. Or you can join the virtual class, which happens on Saturdays at 2 p.m., where we talk through the women of the Bible. We've had some great discussions. We've had some women connect from different states. We've even had someone chime in from London recently, which I thought was really cool. So chime in. Those 3 ways you can connect. Feel free to connect with us. It's, again, you can subscribe to the channel. You can email me at theologyofwomen@gmail.com. Or you can join the virtual chat on Saturdays. And actually, you have to email to join the virtual chat, so just email me anyway. Or you can DM me on my social media. Again, on Instagram, it's Dr. TLC squared. Or you can hit me up on Twitter at Dr. T Marie. I thank you guys for listening and watching these videos. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to be studying through the women of the Bible with you all. I'm so glad the Lord called me to do this. It's just been enlightening for me myself. I hope that it's been enlightening for you, and I hope you're enjoying it. And hopefully the videos will get better the more I do this, the more my abilities and technical skills will improve. We shall see. But I'm so glad you joined me today, and thank you so much for tuning in. I love you all, and I appreciate you all, and I appreciate your prayers, and I pray that my voice will get better so I can continue to do these videos. Love you all. Tune in next time for episode 6 and 7. Thanks, ladies. Bye.